Okay, here's the part 8 video. Okay, so the owner of a car dealership planned to develop strategies to increase sales. He hoped to learn the reasons why many people who visit his car lot do not eventually buy a car from him. Okay, so we want to be real careful here. Um, he hoped to learn the reasons why many people who visit his car lot. Okay, so that's the population, right? Okay, and why they don't buy a car from him. So do not eventually buy a car from him. This is going to be a characteristic. All right. So at the end of the month, he sent surveys to people who did not buy the car, asked them why. About 1/3 of them returned the survey. All right. So about 1/3 of them returned the survey. So you have some non-response there. And our P hat, because we don't actually know what P is 44.44, right? Of those indicating that they found a lower price elsewhere. So this is our characteristic of lower price. This is the reason they didn't buy. Okay? So the population of interest is all potential car buyers. And people who visit his car lot, okay, maybe, I'm thinking, I would like to say maybe people who visited his car lot, but they are all potential car buyers, okay? This survey design suffered from non-response bias. He sent them, let's see, for 1 month he asked the sales staff to keep a list. Okay, at the end of the month he sent surveys to people who did not buy the car, asked them why. About 1/3 of them returned the survey. Yeah, so this is voluntary response. So certainly the survey design suffered from a non-response bias. This is certainly going to be true. It wasn't really random. Okay, these people self-selected. And because it comes from a sample, 44% is a parameter, not a statistic. No, if it comes from a sample, it is a statistic, so this one's going to be false. All right, so now I look, and I know 2 is good, okay, and 3 is bad. So if 2 is good and 3 is bad, it can't be C. If 2 is good and 3 is bad, it can't be A, okay. So it can't be 1 only because I know 2 is in there. So it's either got to be 2 or 1 and 2. And so this makes me a little sad because as I read this, I was thinking people who visited his car lot. Okay? Now, they are all potential car buyers. And he would like to have all potential car buyers at his lot, but he probably can't do that. So he can only contact the sample who actually visit him. This is the only way he can collect the information. So I'm going to say that because he wants to know what all potential car buyers think, but he can only survey those people who visit his car lot, that 1 is also part of the answer. And so I'm going to select E for 1 and 2 only. So sometimes there may be, sometimes you need to think about what data you can collect versus what you are interested in. Okay? So here, the car dealership is actually invested and curious about all car buyers, but he can only select people who visit his car lot to send a survey to because that's the only information he can collect. All right? So while this one gets the little question mark and it requires a little bit of inference, the true answer is going to be E. Okay? Oh, short answer. Here we go. All right. So I'm going to read this and then I'm going to scroll up, right? So, a member of a city council has proposed a resolution opposing the construction of a new state prison there. The council members decide that they want to assess public opinion before they vote on this resolution. Below are some of the methods that are proposed to sample local residents to determine the level of public support for the resolution. Match each one with the listed sampling techniques. Okay, so now that I've read the question, I can scroll up and make sure that you can see everything. And so here, place an announcement in the newspaper asking people to call their council representatives. Council members will tally the calls that they receive. All right, so you're asking people to call in. That's a voluntary response. Have each council member survey 50 friends, neighbors, or co-workers. That's pretty convenient. Okay, so that's going to be a convenient sample. Have board members assign voters. Each voter a number, then select 400 of them using a random number table. So that's just a simple random sample. We put the whole population in a hat and we draw them out at random. Go to a downtown street corner, a grocery store, a shopping mall. Interview 100 typical shoppers at each location. Okay, so this one is judgment. Now, we didn't talk about judgment very much in class, if at all, right? But if you're going to a downtown street corner or a grocery store or a shopping mall, you're making a judgment that these are going to be typical individuals, that the shopping mall is going to be representative, okay? And so that's a judgment call, okay? It's a judgment call. Just like we were talking about the mall area at the school, okay? If you're thinking about the mall area of the school as being a good place to take a sample, you're making a judgment on that, all right? Randomly pick 50 voters from each election district. Well, there's a homogeneous component, okay, and it's not census, so this is going to be a stratified sample. Call every 500th person in the phone book. That sounds pretty systematic to me. Randomly pick several city blocks, then randomly pick 10 residents from each block. So I've randomly picked blocks, and then I've randomly picked residents. It sounds like I've done more than one thing. So if I've done more than one thing to randomly assign, that must be multi-stage. It cannot be a cluster sample. Even though I've picked city blocks, I haven't done census. So if I haven't done census, it's got to be multi-stage. Randomly select several city blocks and then interview all the adults. Well, if you're going to interview all of the adults, that is going to be a cluster sample. All right? Very important. Okay? So if you're randomly picking 10, all of the adults, 50 voters, election district, you have to think about homogeneous groups versus heterogeneous groups. All right? Okay. 37. We have calculated a 95% confidence interval and would prefer for our next confidence interval to have a smaller margin of error without losing any confidence. In order to do this, we can, okay, if you change the z value, you change the confidence level. So you can't do that. All right? If you take a smaller sample, you get more variability and the margin of error goes up. So you don't want to do that. But if you do take a larger sample, the margin of error will go down, and that will give you a smaller margin of error with the same confidence level. And so 2 is the only correct answer here, and that's D. Okay, so for 38, which is true about a 98% confidence interval for our population proportion, we are 98% confident that other sample proportions will be in our interval. Has nothing to do with sample proportions, okay? So 1 is not going to be true. There's a 98% chance that our interval contains the population proportion, okay? And so That's definitely the definition, so 2 is going to be true. And the interval is wider than a 95% confidence interval would be. Now, this one gives me a little bit of pause, 3, right? Because if the samples are the same, to be more confident requires a wider interval. So this would be my 98% confidence interval, and of course my 95% confidence interval is going to be thinner than that. But what if the samples aren't the same? All right, so what if samples are not the same? Okay, then you have to think about, well, then the intervals could be any size, right? So this one gives me a little question mark. Well, I know 2 is right, and I know that 1 is wrong. Okay, so it can't be 3 only, because 2 is definitely true. It can't be 1 and 2, okay, because 2 is definitely true and 1 is definitely false. It can't be 1 only, because 1 is definitely false. It could be 2 only, okay, or it could be none. Well, wait a minute. None of them can't be true because 2 is true, okay? So what they must be saying here is, because they haven't specified that the 95% confidence interval has the same sample size, then we cannot compare them. They could be any size, and so we have to choose E here, okay? And now we're way over the 10 minutes, and so I want to stop.